We back.
We back. Meow bench dash. Sell
Just got
edition.
it right there.
There it is.
Sell
Sell
edition, week 6.
So high on this intro. Boom.
Bam. Let's just start it off with Sammie Coates.
Oh, just gonna.
I'm
start
not
right
really.
into it.
I'm just gonna dive right into this one with Sammie
All
Coates.
right,
Now, if you
good.
watch the buy video, depending on what the order that we put these out, we found a way to bring Sammie Coates into every single one of our player takes.
Yeah.
So let's just get this out of the way. Sammie Coates is our sell of the week.
Yeah.
I think his value is probably the highest that it's going to be.
For sure.
And, well, here's the thing with Sammie Coates. I will say this. You need to sell him like he is, I won't say a wide receiver 1, but a high-end wide receiver 2 right
Yeah.
now. Because it's quite easy with the narrative, with the targets that he's been getting, with the production that he's been putting up, the fact that he's in Pittsburgh's offense, which has looked elite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You look at the last couple of weeks, they blew out Kansas City. They put up a lot of yards against the Jets, which hasn't been hard to do. Fair play. But
Right.
Sammie Coates, you can sell him as this. Okay, he's right behind Antonio Brown. If you look at their production, he only has 26 fewer receiving yards
Yeah.
than Antonio Brown. He's basically taken over completely. Marcus Wheaton is an afterthought. And the reason why I want to sell, not that I think Eli Rogers is going to come back and have like this huge role, but Eli Rogers has been hurt
Yeah.
with this turf toe, right? Eli Rogers had a full practice on Wednesday. So his production might take a hit. And
Yeah.
we saw him drop a lot of passes, right? That might be
Yeah.
the most frustrating 25-point performance that I've ever seen.
11 targets. All of them catchable, which is pretty crazy. And he drops 5 of them. 5 drops. And these weren't like drops where it was like a ticky-tacky drop where it's like he's stretching out and he can almost get it, but it just kind of like bounces off his hand. These are like, that falls into his hand and then just bounces right out. Like these are like horrendous. It reminds me of a Kelvin Benjamin, like Kelvin in his rookie year, where he'd like have these like infuriating drops where it's like, how do you drop that pass? Then on the next play, he'd make some like circus catch. And it's like, how can you catch that? But you can't make this really basic catch on the play before. And yeah, I'm with you on the Eli Rogers thing. And even though this is like total hyperbole, if Ladarius Green does come back and he's a thing, that's going to eat into the target share. I mean, he might not, but still, Jesse James doesn't warrant that many targets outside of the red zone. So that's something.
Yeah, I mean, Sammie Coates, he's seen a huge uptick in ownership in just the past couple of weeks. I mean, he had steady production. He had a 10-point week in week 2, and then last week against before the Jets against Kansas City, he had 9 targets. So he has been seeing targets, but he didn't explode until this last week against the Jets. And you have to look at the Jets secondary a little bit too, right? They have been susceptible to getting torched by these outside speedster wide receivers. And basically, if you look at Sammie Coates' long touchdown, it was just a simple go route. He just ran down the field and Roethlisberger chucked it up to him, and he actually caught this one and then took it into the end zone. But the moment that sticks out with me the most was, I think they were on – I'm a Lev Bell owner, disclaimer. So I was watching this game. They had the ball like the 1-yard line. So I'm sitting there being like, just give the ball to Bell, please. and Roethlisberger drops back. He has Sammie Coates wide open in the end zone from 1 yard out. Throws a perfect pass, not too hard. He didn't like gun it in there from a short distance. He floated it right into Coates' hands, clanked right off of his hands, and then Coates just collapsed and was lying on the ground like he was dead.
Yeah.
He stayed on the ground for like a minute.
Yeah.
Just hands in his face because he knows he just made a huge blunder. And I was like, oh my God, Sammie Coates, what are you doing? But then again, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns. For somebody who didn't watch the game, because I feel like a lot of people don't pay attention to these drops.
Yeah.
Right? They might just take a look at the box score. They might see that, he had 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sammie Coates is a sell, guys.
Yeah. I mean, especially because, 70-something yards and one of those touchdowns was on that go route. That's just like a fluky play. You can't expect him to just sprint past a corner every game. Like that's not like a super like he was like 5 yards ahead of that guy. It was insane.
Yeah.
So like you take away that play, which obviously always kind of sucks to do, but with a fluky play like that, it's a little more fair. And you're looking at like 60 yards and a touchdown, which is probably more of what he is of this like mid to low end wide receiver too, who like a touchdown makes his week, and without it, he just kind of has like okay yardage. It's probably what he actually is.
Yeah, he's not Sammie Coates.
No. Yeah, Sammie Coates.
He does have like a freakish athletic build.
Yeah.
Right. So there is potential there. I think they're trying desperately to turn him into Martavis Bryant. Like they're trying to get him involved, and we saw it. I mean, Antonio Brown had a fairly quiet game against the Jets as far as Antonio Brown goes. Right. When you're looking at the two receivers, you would think that Brown would be the one to get the 25 points. But I think they're making a concerted effort to get Sammie Coates the ball. Maybe they're hoping that Sammie Coates can be that X factor where if they show opposing defenses that they have this threat, that the defenses are going to have to respect that, which will just give more space to Antonio Brown, which will give more space to Le'Veon Bell.
Which will give more space to Ladarius Green.
Give more space to Jesse James. So Sammie Coates, I think you can go out and sell him for a pretty decent package right now, just because of the offense he plays in, because of the production he's put up. The narrative is easy. He's right behind Antonio Brown, and he's still going to be facing the lesser cornerback because no one is going to look at Pittsburgh and say, oh, we need to put our top corner on Sammie Coates. That's not going to happen with Antonio Brown. So he will have weaker matchups. Easy to sell right now. Very easy.
And a sort of a good thing to point out is some people might say to wait a week to sell him because he gets Miami this week, who also have just like an awful secondary, and so like maybe he exploits them again. But the problem with waiting on that is one, he might not. It could very easily be a huge Antonio Brown game and Coates kind of comes back down to earth. And two, it's easier to sell him when he has a good matchup. It's easier to be like, look what he just did, and now he gets a secondary that's just as bad. Because I've kind of mentioned this before, but a lot of owners are sitting there looking like, how does this trade help me immediately this week? Even if they aren't, 0-5 or 1-4 where they need to win immediately. They might have a winning record, but they're still like, how does this trade help me right now? And that kind of helps you with Coates to be like, look, he has a great matchup this week. You can use him immediately.
Yep. And, his splits at home and away, it's really early in the season. But, if you just look at his performances, week 1, he had 2 catches for 56 yards on the road. Mm-hmm. He goes back home and he puts up 5.6 points on the road. Week 2, he's at home. He puts up 10.3. So you get 10.3 points from Sammie Coates. You're very happy. Mm-hmm. They go back out on the road against Philly in that game where they got humiliated, and he puts up 5 points.
Right.
Then he goes back home 2 games in a row against Kansas City and New York, and he's putting up 7.8 against Kansas City with 9 targets and 25.9 against New York with 11 targets. So he has had better production at home. He's about to go on the road against Miami, who is a bad secondary, but he might not put up the numbers. And I feel like he hasn't solidified himself yet. So you kind of have to take advantage of where he's at now. Because like you said, if he goes against a terrible secondary and puts up pedestrian numbers, then people are going to be like, he's too boom or bust, right? But after his last 2 games where he's seen, an average of 10 targets a game, he's put up respectable numbers. I think the time is right.
Yeah. I am with you on the get rid of Sammie Coates. Let's move on to our next sell. This is a guy I pointed out more. I don't even really know if you're on the same page as me, but Tevin Coleman as a sell.
Okay.
A lot of this has to do with one, the shift in volume. It was like an even split early in the season, but it's kind of been trending away from that as the season has gone on, especially this last week. In Denver, Tevin had 10 touches and Freeman had 26. And that's much more of your like lead back to change of pace back kind of split. But Tevin kind of puts up this fluky line of 4 catches for 132 yards and a receiving touchdown, which just isn't really what Tevin Coleman is. Like, I watched that game, and it was kind of crazy to see because he would just be wide open, and then he'd catch the pass and then sprint for another 30 yards, and it was like there was no concerted effort to tackle him with any kind of urgency. It was kind of bizarre. So I wouldn't expect that to be a regular occurrence. So his production is kind of bolstered by this wacky receiving line. And the touches just aren't quite there to expect it to be there consistently. He's probably going to be pretty boom or bust the rest of the way. But he's had enough boom weeks like out of the season that you could probably sell him as like an RB2, and I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. Freeman has actually been one of the players that has surprised me this year.
Yeah.
I really didn't think much of him coming into the season. I thought that he slowed down. The Freeman we saw towards the end of last year was the Freeman that we would get this year. But he has looked good.
Yeah.
And he looked good against Denver. What surprised me a little bit was that Freeman got a carry from the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
4th and 1. They decided to go for it, and they gave the ball to Devonta Freeman, the small running back, and he took it into the end zone. So if Freeman starts getting this, because I know the narrative a couple of weeks ago was that Coleman is eating into Freeman's red zone time, and that Coleman's going to be this vulture. We saw it in the New Orleans game where Freeman was going off, right? Freeman had the yardage, but Coleman scored all the touchdowns.
Yeah.
He scored the 3 touchdowns in that game. And he scored another receiving touchdown in this last game. But it looks like Freeman is the lead back. You pointed it out already with the usage numbers. He's receiving more carries. He seems to be like the de facto first and second down back. Coleman will come in for like his odd series. But like you said, 10 touches. He's kind of being used as a change of pace back, which will work every once in a while, but it's not going to be something you can consistently count on. And I think his value is high enough right now, especially after that game against Denver, who is supposed to be an elite defense, right? They are an elite defense or a good defense. You can be like, look what Coleman just did against Denver. He's somebody you want. And he's a Devonta Freeman injury away from being like a bona fide top 5 running back. So yeah. I like selling Tevin Coleman, but the value has to be right, because if you look at the numbers right now, it's through 5 weeks, but they're both RB1s. They're both top 8 running back plays. Tevin Coleman is actually the 7th overall running back in the game. Just behind him is Devonta Freeman. So Tevin Coleman's actually outscored Devonta Freeman in standard scoring, averaging 15 points a game, which is crazy, right? But Devonta Freeman is right there. I would sell Tevin Coleman. I just don't know what to make of this. Like, if this is sustainable, then we could see for the first time like a backfield that can produce 2 startable running backs at the same time. Like, we're not talking about like the Doug Martin, Charles Sims, where you can flex Sims if you need to because he'll see some volume in the passing game. But Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman right now on 2 separate teams could be the running back 1, which is very strange to think about. But hey, I think if you can get value for Tevin Coleman usage-wise because of what we've seen, go out and do it.
Yeah, I mean, he's more of a soft sell because he is, a Freeman injury away from being like a legit RB1. He's just more of like someone who's running back desperate, is willing to value him as like what his numbers are showing, which is an RB1, even though I don't think the volume is there enough to have that be a consistent thingamading. Thingamading.
I mean, with Atlanta too, they've looked really, really good. I have to tip my hat to Atlanta, but we saw this last year. They started 6-0 last year, and they finished 8-8. So they were off to a hot start and they hit a wall. I'm not going to say that's going to happen this year because I think their win against Denver on the road was really, really impressive.
Yeah.
And it's kind of announced that they're legit, right? Because everything before that Carolina game was like, okay, Atlanta's been a mirage. They're going to come back to earth against Carolina. Well, that didn't happen at all. They blew Carolina out of the water, and it's turning out to be, or looking like at least, that Carolina's not very good. But then going on the road into Denver, where I think in their last 18 games at home, they've only lost 1, or they had only lost 1 going into that game, or 2. They're dominant home team, and Atlanta just came in and lit them up. So there is narrative to go in Tevin Coleman's favor right now. Not only is he putting up numbers, but you can just point to the offense. Look, Atlanta's elite, and if you get the package. Now, what would you trade Tevin Coleman for?
I think with Tevin Coleman, if I'm looking at like wide receivers, I'd be willing to take for him. I would take Amari Cooper if the owner of that is running back desperate. Maybe Brandon Cooks. Kind of mentioned him as a buy. Coleman might get you Cooks. Either of the Broncos wide receivers, like Thomas or Sanders. I think I'd trade Coleman for either of them. That's kind of the range of wide receiver. The like high-end wide receiver 2 who you expect to produce better than they have, at least in the short term, maybe even the long term. Running back wise, if for some reason someone's willing to do a 1-for-1, I mean, if you could do Coleman, if you could do a package that involves you getting Coleman and getting Lacy back, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Eddie Lacy. I mean, he was in our buy section, or like a Doug Martin.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
You can package Coleman together and get a Doug Martin. I don't think you can do a 1-for-1 if the Doug Martin owner is smart, but you might be able to add to Tevin Coleman, maybe do a 2-for-1 and get Doug Martin. That would be legit.
A twofer.
A twofer.
Twofer.
Too legit.
All right, let's move on to our next sell. We mentioned him last week.
Jeremy Curley.
No. We were going to talk about Jeremy Curley, but I just don't think it's worth it. No one actually owns Jeremy Curley. And that is Melvin Gordon. We went off on him last week. It's really just that he's been very inefficient because that offensive line is just in tatters. He's been sort of buoyed by this unsustainable touchdown rate. He does it again, this week with the receiving touchdown. His running was a little bit better. He actually averaged over 4 yards a carry. But that's against Oakland. So what does that even mean?
What are those? Who is Oakland?
Who even is Oakland? So just again, like the touchdown rate's going to fall off. He can be valued as an RB1. To sort of show you that we practice what we preach, we did sell Melvin Gordon last week in a joint league we do, in a package that got us Odell Beckham back, which after 1 week doesn't look great, but I guess you just got to trust Odell. Odell finds a way.
Hey, he scored.
He did.
Scored his first touchdown of the year.
He did.
Helped us not win that matchup.
Helped us tie. Helped us not lose.
Yeah. Hey, we'll take it. We're still technically undefeated, but that was exactly the package we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
If you can package Melvin to get Odell, go ahead and do it. Now we had to add in a couple extra pieces to get it done, but I still really like the trade.
It was Dorsett, who's like proven to be useless basically at this point, and Deshaun Jackson, who could have a nice year, but he's just so boom or bust, and we didn't really need him. That was like a pretty easy thing to do to just make our receiving core redonk-a-donk.
Anyways, but not to talk too much,
just a reminder that if you didn't sell Melvin Gordon last week, do it this week, because his value should still be high, coming off of another touchdown week.
Yeah. If you watch the Raiders game too against San Diego, more times than not, he was getting stuffed. Mm-hmm. He did break away for one long run. That was it. And then if you look at all of his other runs, they were pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
And then he had that receiving touchdown at the beginning of the second half where it looked like Oakland just didn't come out to play in the second half, because San Diego marched right down the field and scored really, really quickly twice, and then just was not heard from again after that. But the thing to point out is that I know McCoy came out and he said they're not concerned, but Melvin Gordon fumbled at the end of the New Orleans game, cost him a win. He fumbled at the end of the Oakland game, cost them a win.
Yeah.
Okay? You might not say that, it's not all Melvin Gordon's fault. Look at the field goal that they botched. Look at all these other plays that went wrong. But that play right there, fumbling on their side of the field, was a huge momentum shift in that game. Mm-hmm. And right after that, if you remember, Oakland took the lead and never gave it back. They the 4th and 2 Carr to Crabtree connection, touchdown. They got the 2-point conversion, and San Diego never had the lead again. So that Melvin Gordon fumble really came back to bite them, and it's the second week in a row. Now, the thing is that kind of saves Melvin Gordon is there's no one else, right? Like, if he was having a fumbling problem and there was somebody knocking on the door, like, waiting to get touches, then he might start losing volume already. But the thing with Melvin Gordon is I just don't think we're going to see this sustainable touchdown rate, his production will probably drop, and he has not only a banged up offensive line, but not like a fantastic schedule. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, we don't need to harp on him much longer. Let's move on to our next sell. Martellus Bennett, the three touchdown wonder. Yeah.
Wow.
8 targets for 6 catches, 67 yards and 3 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be surprising anyone to say this is not a reproducible thing. You know, maybe he has another multi-touchdown week this season, but this isn't the norm. He hasn't supplanted Gronk as the number 1 tight end in this offense by any means. This was just kind of a fluke, really. I mean, it shows that Cleveland can be just gashed by the tight end, but it's not something I would expect to continue. And the sort of nice thing with Martellus Bennett is that historically, there's sort of a narrative you could present of like, look, this is the Aaron Hernandez Gronk thing from years ago, and now it's Martellus Bennett instead. And Aaron Hernandez was like a legit tight end one during that time, so Martellus Bennett can do it too. And so you could, sell him with that narrative and get a little something in return. Whereas I think that was mostly just the Gronk Brady connection kind of warming back up. Gronk finally getting up to game speed. I don't know if Gronk's going to be quite the target monster he was in seasons past. Now that Martellus Bennett is there, but this is not what Martellus Bennett is.
3 touchdowns, yeah, and Julian Edelman wasn't really involved in this game. Yeah. He's been hampered by this foot injury, but I mean, typically he is Brady's favorite target, right alongside Gronk. So he was very limited. He's still limited. I think if he comes back in his full speed, then we're going to see, we're not going to see 3 touchdowns from Martellus Bennett.
No.
But I did enjoy seeing Gronk owners just tilt into oblivion. The fact that Martellus Bennett was the one who caught all 3 of the touchdown passes. Yeah. And Gronk still had a respectable game.
Yeah, he still did well.
He went over 100. But if he would have, received one of those touchdowns, he would have had like an amazing game. But yeah, Martellus Bennett, I think it's harder to sell tight ends.
It is, yeah. The market just isn't really there for tight ends because most people have like a serviceable enough tight end. So they're going to be like, I don't know, do I really need to pay up? So you're going to have to target a little bit low. But we kind of mentioned during the buy segment, like I would do Martellus Bennett for like Jeremy Maclin or like we mentioned Latavius Murray. I'd probably do it. I'd probably be willing to make that trade. Where does he kind of sit for you?
I mean, I would take just about anyone just because of the whole landscape of the tight end position. It's really a crapshoot. And I think if you can get value back from Martellus Bennett, then you have to take it because, I mean, we're not going to see 3 touchdowns again from Martellus Bennett. And you can probably find a good enough tight end on the waiver wire. So if you can get positive value in terms of other positions, which are much more important, if you can get a wide receiver that is usable, maybe not to start. If you can get a startable player for Martellus Bennett, I mean, geez, by all means, go do it. But if you can get like a fringe flex play that has a chance to explode down the road, like John Brown,
that'd be a good trade. Yeah, I would do that too.
I would go do it.
Or Martellus Bennett for like Sammie Coates.
Sammie Coates.
Sammie Coates, yeah.
Wait, I thought we were talking about selling Sammie Coates. What's going on here?
I mean, whatever. He's the best.
All of a sudden he's Sammie Coates again, huh?
All of a sudden he's Sammie Coates. No, yeah, sell Martellus Bennett, basically. We don't need to say much more about him.
Yeah, he's a tight end. Sell him. I mean,
get rid of him.
It seems like Greg Olsen is the only elite tight end this year.
Basically, yeah. Let's move on to another sell.
Hit me.
Theo Riddick. Ba-bam.
Bam! Theo Riddick, yes. If you missed it, Justin Forsett has officially signed with the Detroit Lions of Detroit. Further muddying that situation, they have Dwayne Washington probably coming back.
Yeah.
They have Justin Forsett. They have Theo Riddick. Theo Riddick has kind of proven that he's not that great between the tackles. So he's going to stay relevant in PPR. Okay, because he will be that pass-catching back that can have these monster weeks. But in standard leagues, he is going to be relegated to that third down pass-catching role. We saw probably the highest point of his ceiling in the last week. I think he had a week 1 game, which was very similar.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, he should have value. He just put up a big week. He's a running back.
Yeah.
Running backs always should bring back value. And I think we just mentioned it with Forsett, with Dwayne Washington. He won't really be receiving the early down work, so you're kind of banking on getting a third down catch, maybe getting some red zone looks, but he's kind of touchdown dependent and standard at this point.
Yeah, he really is, and it's not like the Amir injury happened, and his volume didn't spike that much. He's still sitting around like 10 carries a game, 6 to 9 receiving targets. It's his workload has kind of stayed the same with Amir out. They tried to lean on Dwayne more, and that didn't work because he got hurt, and so they've been leaning on Zach Zenner, but that hasn't really meant anything. So it's it's
double Z.
So yeah, it's just the touchdowns are making him productive, but I wouldn't. That's not something you can really count on week to week, and it's about to get muddier. So try to sell him as like an RB2 to a running back desperate team.
Yeah, I think you can do it. There are plenty of running back desperate teams out there. So, I mean, if you drafted Theo Riddick late and you have running back depth, then you can use him to bolster other parts of your roster. I mean,
Indeed.
This is kind of the point. We're just reaching that point where if you are sitting in a good spot, if you feel confident that you are going to make the playoffs, you can start setting yourself up for the postseason run. Now, you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, but if you're 4-1 or 5-0 and looking at your upcoming schedule, looking at the makeup of your roster, this is when, maybe not this week, but in the upcoming weeks, is when you kind of start to tinker around a little bit to set yourself up for that championship run. And if you could sell off Theo Riddick and get somebody who can help you down the stretch, then by all means, do it.
And do it, yeah.
Do it.
The sort of range of wide receivers I'd be looking at is like, we'll talk a little bit about like Emmanuel Sanders. You might be able to swing that off of a down week. I've been like talking to the Doug Baldwin owner in all my leagues unsuccessfully. So maybe he isn't really, no one's selling him right now coming out of the bye. Maybe like, no, I held him through the bye. I'm keeping him. But that's kind of the range of that kind of, mid-range wide receiver too. You might be able to land for him.
Yeah, I mean, I would do that definitely. And even if you have to package somebody along, let's just use two of our sells. I mean, you could probably sell a Theo Riddick and a Sammie Coates for somebody very valuable. You can do a 2-for-1. You look at a team that needs a running back and you want to target maybe a higher end wide receiver. You go, well, look, I'm going to give you a wide receiver to replace with Sammie Coates. And then I'm going to give you a running back with Theo Riddick, who just put up a monster week. Yeah. So you could probably, sell that package, go and get somebody like an Allen Robinson, maybe.
Yeah. That's not impossible.
Probably not like very likely, but it's something to kick the tires on. Or any other good receiver that's kind of having, a down period, or it could be on a bye week or something like that.
Maybe Brandon Cooks, if you're buying into that package might land you him. If you're trying to swing that package for a running back instead, Eddie Lacy or Doug Martin, those guys you might be able to get out of that package. If they're having problems at wide receiver and they're like, oh man, my receiver depth is just awful. And you're like, hey, here's Sammie Coates, and I'll kick in a Theo Riddick. That might be possible.
Yeah, I mean, there are probably very few balanced teams in your league.
Yeah.
Just from, we're in 5 leagues.
Yeah.
And just looking at the landscape of the other lineups, you typically get teams that have strong running back cores or strong wide receiver cores, but there are really only like 2 or 3 teams in a 12-team league on average that I've seen that have really good balance. So these are the unbalanced teams are who you're trying to pick apart, right?
Definitely.
You see that they're really desperate for a certain position, and you attack. You attack that position. You attack! And Sammie Coates and Theo Riddick, it's a nice package, right?
That's a nice package. I agree.
I love talking about nice packages, man.
Let's move on to, I guess, our last sell.
Let's do it.
Terrance West.
Who?
Terrance West, exactly who.
You mean the lesser of the two Wests between Charizard West and Terrance West.
I mean, sure, I'll take that shot at Terrance West. I don't care. Why not? The worst West in the league. Uh, yeah, it's, he had that monster week 4 against Oakland, and then everyone's like, oh, he's going to be the guy for now. But then even, this week against Washington, he only got 11 carries, which is what he was seeing on average every week before the Oakland game. So he kind of reverted to what his workload was before that. He put together 95 yards on it. A lot of it came on that crazy 3rd-and-1 play where he rips off a long run because the defense is just completely crowded along the line of scrimmage. Wouldn't count on that being a regular occurrence. And so, and that was against Washington, which is a really good matchup. And now he gets the Giants and the Jets, which are 2 bad matchups, and then his bye week. And you got to think over the span of those 3 weeks, Dixon is going to start getting up to speed, start getting worked in the offense more. By the time they have a good matchup again, Dixon could very well be the guy, or at least like more of the guy than West.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really have a good matchup until week 10 against Cleveland with that bye week mixed in. So now would be the time. I don't know what to make of this whole Trestman thing. I'm interested to see how the Baltimore offense runs now that Trestman is gone. Maybe Dixon does take on more of a role. I know the narrative was, okay, pump your brakes on Kenneth Dixon now. I think he had 4 snaps in the game against Washington. He played 4 snaps. Terrance West was basically the lead back, even though he did only receive 11 carries. But you're right. I mean, before the 21 he had against Oakland, it was 10 against Jacksonville, 11 against Cleveland, and 12 against Buffalo.
Yeah.
So right around where he's been. And with the upcoming schedule, with the fact that he is Terrance West, with the fact that there are plenty of running back needy teams out there, and he probably is a viable running back too right now, or at least a flex.
Yeah.
You can get value for Terrance West, and now is the time to do it, because just like with these studs, where when they have a big game, people will remember, oh yeah, they're a stud. Well, as soon as Terrance West puts up a stinker, then he reverts back into a pumpkin, and people are like, oh shit, it's Terrance West. What do we really expect? Because he's had under 10 points in 4 of the 5 games this year. He was splitting time with Forsett early. There is that to mention. But New York, both on the road, and then a bye. The next 3 weeks, he's he's benchable almost.
Yeah,
he'll
be fine during his bye week.
Oh yeah, he'll light bye up. Although bye's a pretty stingy defense. They've held everyone to 0 that I've seen.
It's unsustainable. That's going to regress. There's no way bye can keep this up over the stretch of a full season.
I mean, the 2 top defenses in the league, bye and Minnesota.
Who's better, bye or Minnesota?
Minnesota, eh? I mean, Minnesota, they forced a goose egg upon Kelvin Benjamin.
That's true. That's just like bye did or will do. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Kelvin will go off against bye. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, that's it for our cells.
That's it for our cells.
I think that's it. Yeah.
That's pretty much it for the cells this week. We'll hit you up soon with sneaky starts.
Yeah, sneaky starts coming up. And then we'll throw keeping score out sometime this weekend, which seems more like it's just being used for my own enjoyment than anyone else's. But that's fine. I have a point to prove, and I'll prove it to myself if I have to.
Well, by the end of the season, when it's heavily in favor of the running back, then you can pat yourself on the back.
Really point it. Right now, it's there's an even split. It's not very interesting. But sneaky starts have been very successful for us this year. So keep an eye out for that in the coming days. Yeah, we might start posting that one a little bit early, because I know by the time we actually post sneaky starts, it's less than 24 hours before the matchups. Really
in which case, some people already have their lineup set. So we'll look at getting sneaky starts out a little bit earlier in the upcoming weeks. But thank you guys for watching, for commenting. Follow us on Twitter, which is right above Leo Khaleesi's head. And follow us, like us on Facebook, and continue to do all your YouTube-y things.
Yes, like, comment, subscribe. Tell us why we're the best or the worst. Ask us your trade questions on YouTube, as you always are wanting to do. And we will catch you on the flippity floppity. That's all right. That's interesting. Okay.